Since the sleeve tapers gradually as it goes down, we may have a gap forming here which we need to fix. This is because the lower section of the sleeve has a smaller circumference than the upper section. This is why when we fold the sleeve, a gap forms here. We need to let out some fabric from both the seam allowances and re-sew the seam lines. To find out how much fabric to let out, we can open this seam as well. Open the seam starting from here. Finish here about 5 mm from the hemline. Repeat for the other sleeve. Stop here about 5 mm from the hemline. Now pin from the inside to keep the layers in place, about 2 cm from the hemline. Pin in this direction. Make sure the seam allowances are folded. Repeat on this side. We pin in a way so that these edges lay flat, so we can see the distance between them, and let out the right amount to compensate for the gap. Repeat for the other sleeve. We want our hem allowance to be about 6 cm wide. We measure 6 cm and pin here. Now measure this distance at the 6 cm mark. It is about 4 mm. Repeat for the other seam. It is about 4 mm. We do the same for the other sleeve. So this means we need to let out 4 mm from the seam allowances, starting from here, and gradually finish at the hemline. So we need to mark the hemline at the seams using a different color. Catch both layers of fabric. This way we will know where to merge the new seam lines with the old ones when we sew the hem allowance seam lines. Repeat for both sleeves. Remove all the pins. Now remove these basting stitches. Make sure to keep the one marking the hemline. Do the same for this sleeve. Match these folded edges. Then measure 6 centimeters from the thread mark and mark with a tailor's chalk, like this. Then pin mark at the folded edges where we have the chalk mark. Here, and then here, to make the previous seam lines more visible. Turn it inside out and match the pins and pin in this direction. Now we need to mark 6 centimeters here on the wrong side. Measure and mark 6 centimeters from the hemline mark. Where this pin mark and the chalk mark cross, we let out 2 millimeters, which is half our distance to be let out. We based at an angle starting from here, 2 millimeters from this pin that indicates the previous seam line. Finish here at the hemline mark, merging with the original seam line. Repeat for the other seam. Match the folded edges. Measure 6 centimeters and chalk mark here. Insert the pin starting on the chalk mark. Work on the inside. Match the pins and pin in this direction to keep them in place. Then measure 6 centimeters and chalk mark again. Based at an angle 2 millimeters away from these pins, which indicate the old seam line. The 2 millimeters are half of the 4 millimeters we needed to let out. Since we are adding 2 millimeters on this side and 2 millimeters on the other side, we will let out 4 millimeters in total for this seam. Now we fold the hem allowance in at the hemline to check and make sure the inner layer and the outer layer fit together nicely. The hem allowance should not be tight or loose. Do the same for the other sleeve. Next we will sew the hem seam allowance by machine.